A hish rises up to become the first. Here's your look at the new NECA toys. This is the Predator Alpha Predator. The Yautja race began thousands of years ago as the Hishkiten, a primitive species suddenly struggling under the rule of alien invaders. For many centuries, the Amengi were cruel rulers, using the Hish for labor and breeding them for battle, for the entertainment of their masters. But ultimately, the Amengi engineered their own defeat when they produced fighters strong enough to organize rebellion, led by one particularly powerful Hish, who came to be known in legend as the first hunter, the Alpha Predator. It could stand to be that the Alpha Predator was one of my most looked forward to Predators that NECA Toys has ever released, not only due to the backstory it provides, but also to the fan nods of Predator fans out there. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Before we do that, though, we're going to take the tape measure of mine and take it right to the very top of the Predator, the Alpha Predator, and stopping it right there. While I'm calculating out the measurements for this, I'd like to also send out a big thank you to the folks over at NECA who took the time to send the sample that we're looking at in this review. If you're in the market of picking up the Alpha Predator for yourself, some good news. Alpha Predator is available right now in retail stores and online markets as well. According to my tape measure, you're looking at the Alpha Predator standing 8.8 inches in height. Switching that to centimeters, you're looking at the figure standing 22.5 centimeters tall. There is also some considerable significance with the release of Alpha Predator, as it also marks the 100th NECA Predator release, if you could actually believe that. And to celebrate that, to commemorate that, NECA throws a couple of goodies in here as well. Not only do you get the figure, do you get the accessories, but you get this other stuff as well. Let's have a look at that right now. First and foremost, I really like this. You get the poster artwork, something that you can hang on your wall. It so happens to be, if I bring in the box, the exact same artwork depicted on the front of the box you get as a poster as well. As you can see, the standing Alpha Predator victorious. On the back side, though, this is kind of interesting as well, and a contender for perhaps how you decide to display it. If you flip it around, you're actually treated to all the Predators that NECA Toys have released, from Masked Wolf up at the top, all the way down below to Alpha Predator and all the Predators in between. This certainly helps to be a bit of a checklist as well. You can check off, mark off, all the ones that you've added to your collection since the days of starting your collecting of Predator figures. I think I have, looking at across the board here, most of these. Maybe I'm missing a few Comic-Con exclusives, but I have for the most part, I believe, all of these Predators with, again, a few exceptions here and there. Really neat the fact that they would have this. Jungle Briefing Dutch, like for example, glad that they threw that in there. I don't know if you would technically count human characters as part of the list, simply just because, like for example, they have Rick Hawkins in there from the original Predator film. I guess it still falls under Predator, so of course we're going to want to include that. So it's nice that they have that little extra poster. A neat little read-up too, if you also want to learn a little bit more about the Alpha Predator, you get yourself a read-up. I'm going to save going through this entire read-up, but it basically, to sum things up, it once again tells the tale of the ancient Yautja clans known as the Hishkiten. And they were overrun and invaded by the Amengi and basically made into slaves and servants for them. Reading through this read-up of the Alpha Predator, it reminded me very much like the original Planet of the Apes, where the humans rose up and tried to defeat the overrulers, the apes that controlled and made them into slaves. Kale is the member of the Yautja Hishkiten clan who would eventually rise up and become the Alpha Predator that you're seeing right here. I'm sure there's a place where you could probably find this on the internet, and short of, again, just being able to sit through here and read all of this, I will let you at least, if you want to pause it, you could probably just read through it yourself. A good substantial, meaty read, telling the tale of how the Alpha Predator became what he was. That's really cool. One other thing as well, included with the Alpha Predator, You do get yourself a downloadable skin for anybody that's playing the PS4 release of Predator Hunting Grounds. With the downloadable code, it will allow you to install a skin allowing you to play the original Alpha Predator. That's kind of cool. Now, we're going to go ahead. I'm flipping this around so that you guys can see it. I'm going to provide you guys the coupon code, or the downloadable skin code. For one lucky viewer, there it is. That's for you. It's the least I could certainly do. It will allow you to download the Alpha Predator skin. You don't have to let me know who specifically has done that, but there it is. That's just something from me to you. Something that you can use and download the Alpha Predator skin for yourself. Kale, the Hishketen that would rise up to become the Alpha Predator, comes with some really interesting looking accessories. More organic than electronic. You're not going to see plasma casters, nor are you going to see retractable blades or self-destruct mechanisms. Everything on him have been crafted from the carcass of the Amengi, and we'll have a look at those right now. He comes included first with these. These are more cosmetic than anything else. They're either spikes or they're perhaps maybe horns. Now, I think if anything, they're probably something that would have stuck out from the back of the Amengi. Now, these are, if you look at them, really nicely detailed. They don't have a lot of paint going for them, but as you can see, both of them have two pegs located on the bottom here. These serve to actually plug into the back. We're going to go ahead and grab the Alpha Predator, spin him around. This thing falls off a fair bit, and we'll talk about that in a second. But what you're going to do is there's a hole on this side, and there's also a hole on this side, one larger than the other. We're going to go ahead and wiggle this one on, and if you want to follow the same pattern as the one above it, you're going to have them facing inward. So this one just twists in. You just continue to twist it until eventually it goes through the hole on the back of its torso, just like that. This one actually plugs in over here. I thought there might have been a secondary hole that I may have missed, but there's clearly a larger hole right there. And we're going to go ahead and take this and just fit it onto the back. I like that already. None of the things on him are symmetrical. Even like the horn placement on the back of him. Like they don't look on this side that they do on this side. And that's a nice touch as well. So already that's a neat looking Predator, but that's just starting the accessories that he comes included with. He comes with a giant spear, or staff, if you will. And as mentioned, all of these things have been pulled from the carcass of the Amengi. So if you look at the top, for example, the top of the spear actually is the bottom jaw of the Amengi. You can see one has a longer blade. Now, I'm not sure if there's various different species of the Amengi, because if you look at the bottom jaw that is on one side of his gauntlet, it is slightly smaller. So maybe they could have had larger, smaller sized species of the Amengi. One a smaller size, maybe the main masters, and maybe larger, more brutal beasts that were working with them, possibly. As you can see, though, it's really nice the way that they've wrapped this up, taped it up, or obviously not would have been used tape. You can see really nice detail done on both sides, the teeth on either side. It's sort of like these sticking out additional fangs or teeth at the bottom or at the end of the jaw. Most, if not all of it, as you can see, is just simply bone. Bone that's been crafted together. Here would have made a strange place that you would have thought that would have been taped off, because, I mean, if these bones are the way that bones normally are attaching to themselves, you would think that using this would quickly break itself in half, especially if you're wielding it as a weapon. But nonetheless, though, as you can see, it's comprised of individual bones, 1, 2, and 3 down below, and then one of the sharper points on the bottom. Similar, in fact, if we look at the back of it, it's actually similar to the one that's located at the top of his backpack of sorts. You can see right there. This is really cool. I love the design of this, and I think when it comes time to displaying the Alpha Predator, I'm likely probably going to be displaying him with a staff, because I just think it's really cool. It's tall, too. It's taller than actually his head, so that's really neat. Also comes included with sort of a sickle weapon. Now this looks like it would have been forged from still bone. You even see one of the bones slightly sticking out right there at the bottom. Again, it's been bandaged off to hold itself together. It's got some really incredible paint added to it as well. Slightly tints of purple, it seems, added to the color of the cream or beige color they use for the bone. This actually can fit into or onto the belt here. There's a little loop located on the side. Like again, everything on this is organic, so this looks like it probably would have been a spinal cord or possibly tail. But there's a little loop here located on the side. You can either fit this into the predator's hand, or if you wanted to, and probably what I'm going to be doing, is just simply take the handle and navigate it through that opening. So you actually have him just holding it, or sort of carrying it around with him. Put again the figure down for a second. He also comes included with a bone shuriken. And sort of as I'm doing this, I'm thinking like a butcher, what parts of the Amengi would have made these pieces? Again, these could have been like back spikes, these could have been the part of its tail, for example. But as you can see, it's something that I think even the creeper would find fascination in. The fact that he would have been able to forge these throwing shurikens out of actual bone. You can see it's got a slight sheen to it as well. They've added a brushing of additional dark gray to it, so it just adds a little bit of more realism to the fact that this looks like more organic than, again, something that you would normally expect to find with the predators. This doesn't really seem to have a place. I sort of have looked around. I guess you could always just sort of tuck it inside, tuck it underneath the belt. You want to really be careful, though, because obviously this is a thinner plastic. The last thing you would certainly want this to happen is break. And last but certainly not least, before, of course, we get down to the additional hands and all the other stuff, the predator also comes with this. This is the head of the carcass of the Amengi. This is what it would have looked like. This also seems a bit strange and familiar. It's also because it's taken inspiration from the way that the original Predator suit looked in the film. This was, of course, before we got the design of the Yaucha that we know now. Before that, the Predator was more of an insectoid. And funny, interesting story, the Predator was originally going to be played by Jean-Claude Van Damme. And Jean-Claude didn't even like the role he was playing either, because he was hidden all the time in this suit. It's a really nice fan nod, the fact that they would actually make a helmet that is based on the original costume design. Changed, yes. I don't think the Predator would have had its longevity if they had kept the design the way that it is. The Predator design now is so classic and iconic. I don't think it would have worked as well, honestly, going with this insectoid head. As you can see, it's sort of got these mandibles on the side. That's one thing that's carried over to the more common design of the Yaucha. It's really, again, nice coloring. They've got the copper coloring happening there, sort of a honey coloring of yellow around the outside of the eyeball. There's no pupil to be had there at all. It's, again, a really nice looking helmet. Now, it's tricky to fit onto the Predator's head. There's what the interior looks like in case you wanted to see it. To fit it over top of his head, I had a couple of different times and tries to get it, always feeling like it never stayed in place, until I realized right here, on either side, you see how it sinks in on both sides, right here and right here. That is the part that fits over top of its mandibles. I thought initially it went way up here, and that's not the case at all. If instead you take these parts, its top mandibles, and you line it up to these parts right here, you can even kind of see it from the side how it fits in place. And again, that just fits right on top. Again, a couple of times you may have to do this just to get it just in the right place where you want it. And that's what it looks like when the Predator head is in place, the helmet. Now, I'm actually in favor, in a way, to display the Predator figure looking like this, just because it does bring me back to the way that the Predator should have looked in the film before they made the changes that they did. It's, again, a fantastic fan nod to include this, and it's really neat the fact that NECA would incorporate this to this figure. Again, the helmet stays pretty good in place. The easiest, again, trick is just to make sure you get it over top of those mandibles. It's the mandibles on the face underneath that really does hold the mask in place. And you can generally shake it. You can, I suppose, do the blizzard test and it's not going to fall off. But again, it's just a really neat look. That being said, we're going to go ahead and take this off, move it to the side. And one last thing we'll quickly talk about, because I know I keep dodging the looking at the figure, but he does also come with some interchangeable hands as well. Closed fists, not the most exciting things to talk about, obviously, when it comes to Predators. There's so many cool things that the Predator could be carrying around with him that I would certainly not consider the idea of ever having him holding closed fists like this. But you sort of see the age to the skin of this particular Predator. Keeping in mind, these are all ancient Predators. Even before they were considered the Yaucha, they were considered the Hish Kiten, or Hish for short. Again, you've got really unique coloring to it. Longer nails, both on all the 4 fingers and also on the thumbs there as well. But not, again, the most exciting of hands to be using. He does also have gestured hands, which is currently in the sockets of his forearms right now. Or if you want to have him wielding things, the Alpha Predators also have holding hands. Again, it's simply just a case of unpegging the hand that you have right now. Just unplug it, wiggle it right off. You want to be careful of things around the arms, because those are all things that are susceptible to breaking. But sort of just want to wiggle this off, free it from the ball socket joint. Free it from the ball socket, I should say. Just sort of wiggle, 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 pop that right off, and then replace it with the hand that you want to use. You don't have many choices to choose from, but at least, as you can see, that's what the weapon holding hand looks like. Okay, so let's go back to this thing. This is, of course, I'm just going to put the figure down for a second, move some of the accessories out of the way. This is, again, one of the jaws for the Amengi. Now, on this one, as you can kind of see, if I put the two together, he has it halved on both sides of his arm. He has the top half on the right side. He has the bottom jaw here on the left side, or the left side of the screen. But if you put the two together, that's sort of what it looks like. Again, makes me think in a way that there's various different species of the Amengi. Maybe they have beasts similar to the predator dogs. It's not quite sure. To say, though, this actually goes on this side. It fits on these ball joints, but it's very susceptible to popping off. As you put it on and you think you have it in place, the ball joints, I feel, the socket joints, let me just put the figure down here, socket joints don't seem to hold it well enough. It allows this to hinge up and down, but because the ball socket openings are so big, I find a lot of times this pops right off. It's supposed to give you some posability. You really can't move it too far up and too far up in this way, because like I said, it's going to just pop right off. And then this also slides onto this track. These, of all the things on this particular Predator, are things that seem to fall off the most. It's a simple fix. I mean, you simply just pop that back onto its track, and it's supposed to sort of mimic the same thing that the retractable blade has on the movie Predator. The idea that shifts. Just grab the jaw there. The fact that this shifts back and forth is supposed to slide along that track, but it doesn't give you, again, much clearance to work with. And a lot of times, again, as you're displaying the figure for yourself, you're probably going to be retrieving this more times than not. That being said, let's go ahead and finally have a look at the Alpha Predator. Again, my excitement level is considerably high. I've been waiting for this figure for the longest of times because I really wanted to get the Alpha Predator as part of my collection. Primarily, it really was this. It was the helmet that brought me to the yard, if you will, because I was really excited at the idea of displaying the Predator with that, and I still will likely do that. But I gotta say, there's credit should be given for the head sculpt. It's still classic Predator, but it has such an interesting, neat design to it. One thing I really like on this particular Predator, before we go back to his face, is this particular ponytail right here. The additional dreads that sit a little higher than the ones below it. I don't know why I like this so much. In a way, it reminds me of John Travolta from Battlefield Earth. Remember, he sort of had these ponytails sticking out from the top. I don't know why I'm thinking of such a terrible movie when I think of this, but I love the fact that he's got this additional set of dreads that stick a little higher up. It gives a little bit of a better profile, especially when you see it from the side. As for the head sculpt, though, it's really an incredible piece. Primarily it's white, but it's got an interesting coloring to it where it seems to change the way it tilts to the light. In a way, it almost looks slightly translucent. In some cases, it looks like it's pearlesque. In other cases, it looks like it's got a lot of pink and purple to it. They've done a fantastic job of airbrushing this additional purple and pink to the kind of the headpiece, the more crowned piece of the Predator's head there. You can see all these little individual spikes that are also sticking up. As well, on the top of it, you also see these little spots of yellow. In a way, it sort of looks something like a fish, something you would expect to see underwater. You can barely make out the eyes. The eyes are a little harder to see. As you can see, they are the eyeballs themselves, or irises themselves, are more of a red color, with the pupils inside done in black. Again, you've got that additional purple that's been incorporated into it. The mandibles have been added in gold. I really like the teeth that they've done here. Both the inner mouth as well as the outer mandibles are painted in gold. Not something you tend to see too often. But even like the fact that they would paint the inside of the mouth. No, not this inside of the mouth. The inside of the mouth. They've actually painted that in as well. Again, there's really a lot of cool stuff going on just in the head before we actually start even looking at anything else. If you look at the rest of the body, now again, this is where he would have been using the pieces taken from the Amengi hide. So things like, for example, its rib cage. It either looks like a rib cage or it looks like its legs. I feel like it's closer to its rib cage because, as you can see, it sort of spirals its way around to see almost like an eyeball staring right back at you at the back there. Everything on this is organic. And there are actually a few pieces that they were very smartly sculpted. This one here, for example, that I keep playing with. This is a separate piece to the top part of its rib cage. So that allows you still to get the full posability. It doesn't limit it at all. It's very smart, again, the way that they've just overlapped it. So from a distance, it looks like this is all one piece. It has a few pieces of spinal column, it seems, on the side, slightly softer plastic on both. As you can see, there's the other jaw, the top part of the jaw, which does bear some resemblance, but again, still feels like it's a little bit different of a species. So maybe there's categories to the Amengi. The hide has been used for sort of its loincloth or skirting. This is done in a softer plastic, both on the front and on the back, with little tiny skulls represented on there as well. As I continue to try to figure out what parts of the Amengi would have been possibly used, sort of we got these little flaps of bone that's been covered over top of its body. So like the meshing that you would normally expect to see with typical predators is completely gone here. Like his body is very much more, again, that pale white. It's almost like an albino predator. And then you've got the dark colors of the brown of the additional shell and armor pieces covering over top of it. It's really neat the way that they've done this. Even again, you flip around the figure. I'm spending more time I feel, picking out and finding things that I didn't see before. I mean, like even like the bottom section right here, they have this additional spike that sort of uses as a covering plate, as just sort of additional armor that he has on the back of his leg. Really, really cool the way that they've done this. I also really like the fact that his hair is tucked underneath this, as opposed to covering over top of it, which is normally what you see with a lot of predators. The dreads normally drape over both the plasma castor or whatever else it's packing on its back. This is one time where it sort of has the tentacles, the tendrils tucked underneath that. You got to feel he almost even used that so that the Amengi couldn't pull on its hair. Like he really smartly thought this design out. For the figure's articulation, again, I could probably spend a lot more time talking about this guy. His head rotates back and forth. It hinges also up and down. There's just enough clearance, if I move John Travolta's ponytail out of the way for a second, there's enough clearance, as you can see, where if you shift the head up and down, there's still enough open area there where the hair still moves up and down, and it doesn't seem like it's stuck and locked in place. I like that. The shoulders hinge out. I feel like this is going to fall off on me again. But the shoulders hinge out at about a 90, almost just a little less than a 90-degree angle, maybe like an 85 or 80-degree angle bend. You can move the arms forward, you can move the arms back. The shoulders that they've sculpted in are good and soft, that they stay completely out of the way, allowing you to fully rotate the arms all the way around. He has also swivel at the forearm, a double hinge on the elbow, which is a nice touch, and whatever hands you decide to go with, he does have a swivel back and forth and hinge back and forth as well. The hands are a little difficult, I have to admit, to kind of get in there, especially on this one right here, because the hand is covered over by the top of its jaw, the Amengi jaw. Again, it's a little difficult to kind of get your hand in there to change this particular hand out. I don't think this is a separate piece technically, so I guess in a way you could just pop the whole thing out, slide it back on, and then put the hand back in place, or you can completely remove this in its entirety also if you wanted to. Has an upper torso ball joint. It also has a lower torso ball joint right there. The legs split out. You can go forward and back on the legs perfectly fine. There's nothing restricting the articulation on this figure. A swivel on the top cut of the thigh, basically where it's pegged into place. He has a double hinge on the knee. There's one, and there's two at the back. And then for its foot, it does have posability up and down. You can also rock the ankle back and forth. And then technically, you can also rotate the foot all the way around. I'm not really sure why you'd want to, though. There's a lot to sing, certainly, for the praises of this particular piece. Like, as I said, it's certainly one that I've been waiting for the longest of times. When NECA first announced that they were going to be releasing the Alpha Predator, and then we saw images surface of what it looked like, specifically specifically with this particular helmet. I was completely on board, signed off completely on the idea of picking this one up. And now that I physically have it in hand, there's just really a lot of stuff to admire on this particular piece. To think that he also came before all the Yautjas that we see nowadays. He's the one that started it all. The Alpha Predator, known as Kale. One thing I think I really like about the Alpha Predator is that NECA Toys incorporated a nice beefy backstory on Kale and the rest of the Hish-Kiten. You don't normally get that when it comes to NECA Predator releases. Usually, if anything, the Predator is based on a comic or it's based on a movie appearance, and then you sort of have to do a little bit of researching after the fact to learn a little bit more about that particular Yautja. But here in a case where we get a full substantial read-up, it wets my whistle enough where I certainly want to see more of the story of Kale. It would be awesome if they could play this out, not even in a live-action film, but even as an animated feature, an opportunity for them to really stretch their legs and explore the past history of the Yautja, or formerly known as the Hish-Kiten. This figure has a lot of cool details going for it, hopefully done a true service in this review. You really can see the extensive amount of sculpting work to this. Never could be the case where you would say that this figure reuses a lot of similar molds we've seen before. In a lot of cases, he's using a lot of his own primary mold. Probably is not something that we're going to see ever again. The nice touch also is the incorporating of the Amengi head, or the helmet that he wears over top of his head, which is a nice fan nod, of course, to the original 80s Predator film. That's the way the Predator was going to look until they realized it looked a little ridiculous. Jean-Claude Van Damme running through the jungle forest wearing what looked to be an insectoid costume. So it's a great figure both for a backstory of where the Yautja came from, and it certainly is a great fan nod for those that love the original Predator film. This Alpha Predator, in my opinion, I would highly recommend it, and it's definitely worth picking up and adding to your Predator collection. A big thank you again to the folks over at NECA Toys who took the time and sent this my way. What are your thoughts? Let me know. Weigh in down below. Tell me what you guys think of the Alpha Predator, based on whether you picked the figure up for yourself or simply just from this review and this review alone. Also, if you're new to the channel and you're liking the content that you're watching, consider the idea of staying on board. Consider the idea of hitting the subscribe button. Consider the idea of hitting the bell notification, and consider the idea of keeping those peepers peeled of yours, because there's going to definitely be a lot of videos coming your way. We're going to be looking at a bunch of NECA stuff coming up in the next couple of videos, so stay tuned for those. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.